My unborn pup's father died protecting me. The Alpha King honors him every day. The Northern Territories stretched wide and wild, a land of thick forests, misty mountains, and rivers that whispered ancient secrets. Among these shadows, the packs of wolves had ruled for centuries, each bound by codes older than memory. Power, honor, and loyalty were the pillars of their lives, and every pack knew the consequences of breaking them. Leora lived on the edge of the woods, in a small village that was quiet, humble, and often overlooked by the greater powers of the land. She was young, with eyes that reflected both sadness and courage. People whispered that she carried a light within her, though it was hidden beneath her quiet demeanor. Leora had known sorrow too early. Her parents had vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving her to survive on her own. Still, she moved through the forest with a strength that only those who had faced loss could carry. One cold, moonless night, the calm of her village was shattered. The air trembled with the low growls of a rival pack, one that had long sought dominance over the Northern Territories. Flames licked the edges of wooden homes, and screams echoed through the trees. Leora's heart raced as she ducked behind the tall trunks, trying to avoid being seen. It was in that chaos that Kieran appeared. He was a strong, brave warrior from the neighboring pack. His eyes were sharp, filled with determination, and when he saw Leora cornered by the attackers, he did not hesitate. With a ferocity that seemed almost otherworldly, Kieran fought to push back the rival pack. The battle was swift, violent, and terrifying. Kieran shielded Leora with his own body, striking down enemies, yet the numbers were too many. A moment came when Kieran was struck. Leora screamed, rushing to his side, but the warrior held her back with a gentle, commanding grip. "Live," he whispered, his voice steady even as his strength failed. His eyes, soft and warm, met hers for a fleeting second before darkness claimed him. Leora could only watch as the man who had risked everything for her fell into the cold earth, leaving her trembling, terrified, and alone. The village eventually grew quiet. The rival pack had retreated, leaving destruction in their wake. But in the ashes of that night, Leora discovered something she could not have anticipated. Kieran's sacrifice had not only saved her life, but had created a bond that went beyond words. She felt it in the ache of her chest, the hollowness left behind, and the life that had begun within her. The pup she now carried, a gift and a reminder of the hero she had lost. Word of Kieran's heroism traveled swiftly across the territories. Even the most powerful and feared figure of all, Alpha King Thorin, ruler of the largest pack in the north, had heard the story. Thorin was known for his unshakable authority and the silent weight of his presence. Few dared approach him, and fewer still understood the depths of his heart. But when he learned of Kieran's sacrifice, a spark ignited within him, a mix of sorrow and respect. Every day since that night, Thorin began a private ritual. In a secluded chamber of his fortress, he would kneel before a carved stone in Kieran's honor, leaving offerings and speaking words only he could hear. Leora, unaware of Thorin's tribute, tried to rebuild her life. Each day brought its own challenges. The forest seemed more alive now, whispers of danger and magic threading through the wind. She learned to hunt quietly, to move without leaving a trace, and to speak to the wolves that roamed near her village. But her nights were haunted. Kieran's face appeared in her dreams, smiling softly, reminding her of what had been lost and what was yet to come. One evening, as the sky bled red at sunset, Leora felt a strange pull toward the mountains where Thorin's fortress stood. She did not know why, only that something drew her there. Curiosity, grief, and a need for answers mingled in her heart. She moved cautiously through the forest, her steps silent, yet her mind racing with questions. Who was this Alpha King who honored Kieran? Why did she feel a strange connection to a man she had never met? When she arrived at the fortress, the sight took her breath away. Towering walls of dark stone rose against the sky, and banners fluttered with the symbol of the Alpha King. The air around it was thick with power, and even the wind seemed to pause before the gates. Leora's pulse quickened, but she did not turn away. She had survived too much to be afraid now. Inside, the fortress was a labyrinth of stone halls, lit by torches that flickered like golden flames. Guards moved silently, their eyes sharp, but none challenged her presence. Somehow, she found herself guided to a chamber deep within the fortress, a place that felt heavy with both grief and reverence. There, kneeling before a carved stone depicting Kieran, was Thorin. His back was straight, shoulders broad and imposing, but there was a softness in the way his head bowed, a tenderness in the careful placement of his hands. Leora froze, unsure whether to announce herself or remain hidden. She watched silently, her heart swelling with a mix of awe, fear, and something she could not name. Thorin's voice, low and almost melodic, broke the silence. "You were brave, Kieran. You gave everything for her. I will honor you always." The words were meant for the fallen warrior, yet when they reached Leora's ears, they struck something deep within her. She felt both seen and unworthy at the same time, as though the Alpha King's mourning was somehow meant to touch her too. For a long moment, Thorin remained in that position, lost in memory and sorrow. Leora stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. "He saved me. I don't know how to thank him or you." Thorin's head rose slowly. His eyes met hers, dark, commanding, yet strangely gentle. For a heartbeat, the weight of the world seemed to fall away, leaving only two souls suspended in grief and longing. Leora's heart beat wildly, caught between fear and fascination. She realized then that her journey had changed direction. She was no longer just a survivor of a single night of violence. She was now a part of something larger, a story that entwined life, death, and legacy. But before either could speak further, a loud, unnatural howl echoed through the fortress halls. The hair on Leora's arm stood on end. Thorin's eyes narrowed, his body tensing instantly. This was no ordinary threat. It was a warning from the dark corners of the territories, a signal that forces beyond even the strongest pack were stirring. Thorin rose to his full height, moving with a predator's grace. "You should not be here," he said, his voice both protective and commanding. Yet there was no anger in it, only a careful concern. Leora nodded, though she did not move. Something inside her whispered that she was meant to face what was coming, alongside this man who had been shaped by loss and responsibility as much as by power. The howl repeated, closer this time, filled with a sound that chilled the blood. Leora felt the stir of fear and determination all at once. She did not know what awaited them beyond these stone walls, only that the night was far from over. And that the Alpha King who honored her lost protector was not only aware of her presence, but had already begun to see her as more than a survivor, someone whose courage, heart, and future were bound to the fate of the territories themselves. As they stood there, the flickering torchlight casting shadows across the walls, Leora realized the truth of the path she had been pulled onto. She carried life within her, a small, fragile being whose father had died a hero. And now, in the heart of the Alpha King's fortress, she would come to understand the depth of loyalty, sacrifice, and the bonds that could form even in the shadow of death. She looked at Thorin once more, and in his gaze she saw not only grief but the stirring of something unspoken, a connection that could grow into trust, protection, and perhaps, in time, something even deeper. The world beyond the fortress walls was dangerous, filled with enemies, rival packs, and powers unseen. But for this moment, Leora knew she was not alone. The night stretched on, heavy and expectant. Outside, the winds whispered of threats yet to come, of the darkness that moved silently through the forests. Inside, two souls, one carrying life, the other carrying the weight of kingship and honor, stood on the edge of a new beginning. And as Leora's fingers brushed the stone carved in Kieran's memory, she understood that the path ahead would be filled with trials, sorrow, and choices that could define her entire world. The first step had been taken, but the story of courage, love, and legacy had only just begun. The forest outside Thorin's fortress was alive with whispers. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a branch, seemed to speak secrets that only those attuned to the land could understand. Leora felt them all as she walked beside the Alpha King, moving through the halls with a sense of cautious awe. Thorin had allowed her to stay within the fortress walls for safety, yet he never let her wander without purpose. There was a protective weight in his presence, one she both feared and depended upon. Days passed in a tense rhythm. Leora learned the routines of the fortress, how to move silently, how to listen, how to anticipate danger. But each day, her thoughts returned to Kieran, the brave man who had given his life to save her. She would touch her belly, feeling the small life growing inside her, and wonder what kind of world her child would inherit. Would it be peaceful, or would the darkness of the territories swallow them all? Thorin, for his part, did not speak much. His stoic demeanor never faltered, yet those who observed closely could see the subtle ways he carried the memory of Kieran. When he passed the chamber where he honored the fallen warrior, his hand would linger on the stone, and his jaw would tighten as if holding back emotions too deep to name. Leora realized that he mourned as deeply as she did, though in a way that was measured, controlled, and almost ceremonial. One afternoon, as a cold wind blew across the fortress walls, a messenger arrived from a distant border of the territories. He carried word of a rival pack moving with unusual swiftness and intent. The rival pack had learned of Leora's survival and the child she carried. They sought leverage, believing that taking her would weaken Thorin's power and challenge his authority. Thorin's expression did not change at first, but Leora saw the fire in his eyes, the same fire that had made him a king feared and respected across all the lands. "They will not take her," he said simply, his voice low but firm. "Not while I breathe." Leora's heart quickened. She wanted to trust him, yet fear lingered like a shadow. She knew the rival pack was strong, ruthless, and cunning. But in the presence of the Alpha King, she felt a strange safety she had never known in her life. For the first time, she imagined that perhaps she and her unborn pup could survive, even thrive, despite the dangers that surrounded them. Over the next few days, Thorin began to share more of the fortress with her. He introduced her to loyal pack members, each skilled in their own way, each devoted to the protection of the territories and the people within them. Leora learned to hunt within the fortress grounds, to move with the wolves, and to sense danger before it arrived. Slowly, she began to understand the delicate balance of power, loyalty, and courage that defined Thorin's world. Yet, it was the moments of quiet that struck her most. In the evenings, when the torches burned low and the cold wind howled through the fortress, Thorin would sit silently, staring into the distance. Leora would sometimes find herself beside him, feeling an unspoken connection that grew stronger with each passing day. Neither of them spoke much of it, yet their shared grief for Kieran, and the life he had left behind, created a bond neither could ignore. One night, under a sky blanketed with stars, Thorin spoke more openly than he had in years. "Kieran was more than a warrior," he said, his voice softer than usual. "He was brave in ways that words cannot describe. He gave everything for you." Leora's throat tightened. She placed her hand on her belly instinctively, feeling the life that had begun because of Kieran's courage. I don't know how to live without him," she whispered. "And yet I have to for this little one." Thorin looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a brief moment the weight of the king, the ruler, and the warrior melted away. What remained was a man who had known loss, who had witnessed sacrifice, and who felt the stirrings of responsibility, not only to his people but to the life within her. "You are stronger than you realize," he said, "and you are not alone. I will protect you, I promise." But promises, Leora knew, were only as strong as the dangers that tested them. And soon, those dangers would come. One morning, while Leora practiced moving through the forest, she felt a sudden disturbance in the air. The animals sensed it first. The wolves' ears pricked, birds took flight, and even the trees seemed to shiver. Then she saw them, scouts from the rival pack, moving silently, watching her from the shadows. Their intentions were clear, and their presence sent a chill through her. She ran back to the fortress as fast as she could, heart pounding, and found Thorin waiting. His expression was cold, calculating, and ready. "They are here," he said simply, "and they will not leave until they take what they believe is theirs." The days that followed were tense and unforgiving. Thorin strengthened the fortress, placed sentries, and trained Leora in ways she never imagined. She learned to sense threats, to move with speed and precision, and to trust her instincts. The child inside her kicked when danger was near, a subtle reminder of life and hope amidst the looming threat. In the quiet moments between training and planning, Leora found herself drawn closer to Thorin. Their conversations became more personal. She learned of his childhood, the harshness of growing up a leader in a world where weakness meant death. She learned of his solitude, his sense of duty that had often kept him from allowing himself to feel or love. And slowly she began to see him not just as a king, but as a man shaped by sacrifice, honor, and the same sorrow she carried for Kieran. Yet danger did not wait. One evening, as the sky turned the color of blood at sunset, the rival pack attacked. They were swift, organized, and relentless. Thorin led his warriors into battle, a storm of power and strategy. Leora stayed behind, helping to protect those who could not fight. But as the sounds of conflict grew louder, she realized that the enemy was stronger and closer than expected. A sudden shout reached her ears. "Leora!" It was Thorin. She turned just in time to see him strike down an enemy who had breached the fortress wall. Then another and another. His strength, precision, and authority were overwhelming, yet even he could not be everywhere at once. In a moment of chaos, a rival warrior lunged toward Leora. Without thinking, Thorin moved faster than any human eye could follow, placing himself between her and the threat. A sharp blow struck him and he fell to the ground, pain flashing across his face. Leora screamed, rushing to his side, heart pounding with terror. Thorin, even wounded, lifted his hand. "Leora, live," he said, echoing the same words Kieran had spoken. His eyes held a mixture of pain and command, and she knew she could not leave him no matter the danger. Summoning every ounce of courage, Leora fought back, using the skills Thorin had taught her. She moved with speed and precision, protecting the injured king while holding her own against the attackers. It was a dance of survival, fear, and determination, each movement charged with the need to survive and protect the life she carried. Finally, the rival pack retreated, leaving the fortress scarred but standing. Thorin was hurt but alive. Leora knelt beside him, trembling, her hands pressed against his chest as if she could hold him together with her own strength. You should not have done that," she whispered. "You could have been gone." Thorin smiled faintly, a shadow of pride in his eyes. "And you would have survived," he said, his voice low but steady. "I had to ensure that. You and the child both matter too much." In that moment, Leora understood the depth of his care, the weight of his protection, and the unspoken connection between them. They were no longer simply Alpha and Omega, king and survivor. They were two souls bound by grief, responsibility, and the fragile thread of hope that connected them to the fallen hero, Kieran, and the life he had left behind. As night fell and the fortress grew quiet, Leora realized the truth of their situation. The dangers were far from over. Rival packs would continue to challenge them. The territories were filled with threats, both human and supernatural. And yet within the fortress walls, a bond had formed, a bond that could face anything, as long as courage, loyalty, and love guided their path. The forest outside Thorin's fortress had returned to its quiet, though Leora knew better than to trust silence. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle of leaves a possible warning. After the attack by the rival pack, the fortress had been reinforced. Guards patrolled in tighter formations, sentries stood higher, and the walls themselves seemed to hum with a sense of vigilance. Leora moved cautiously along one of the stone corridors, feeling the unborn pup stir within her as if sensing the tension in the air. Each step reminded her that she carried more than herself. She carried a legacy, a life born from sacrifice, courage, and love lost too soon. She thought of Kieran constantly, the man who had given everything for her. And now, every day, she could feel Thorin's eyes on her, not with judgment, but with a silent, protective intensity that both comforted and unnerved her. Thorin had been recovering slowly since the battle. His body was strong, yet even the strongest warriors had limits, and the blow he received had left him stiff and weary. Leora helped him with small tasks, fetching water, preparing herbs, and simply staying near enough that he felt she was safe. She could not explain why, but being close to him gave her courage. And she noticed, more and more, that Thorin was beginning to trust her, not just as a survivor or a ward, but as someone important, someone he might rely on when decisions of life and death were at stake. One morning, while the sky was painted in soft pink and gold, a messenger arrived with news that unsettled the calm. The rival pack was not finished. They had allies beyond the borders, creatures and warriors whose names were whispered in fear. Leora listened carefully as Thorin's face darkened with concern. "They are planning something larger," he said quietly, almost to himself. "They seek to end what Kieran began and to take what you carry." Leora's fingers pressed against her belly. The pup. The life that symbolized hope, courage, and the memory of Kieran. She felt its tiny movements as though it understood the danger. Her fear mingled with determination. She would not let this child, or Thorin, fall into the hands of enemies. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down, heavier than anything she had faced before. Thorin, seeing her resolve, nodded. "You are stronger than you know," he said, "but even strength alone will not be enough. You must learn more about him, about Kieran." Leora blinked. "About Kieran? What do you mean?" Thorin's gaze grew distant, his mind returning to memories he rarely shared. "Kieran was more than a brave warrior," he said slowly. "He carried a secret. A part of his life that connected him to powers older than even my knowledge, powers that could protect or destroy the pack." Leora's heart raced. "Powers?" she asked, unsure whether she wanted the answer. "Yes," Thorin replied. "You must understand them. If you are to carry his legacy, if the pup within you is to survive, you must be ready for the forces that seek to harm us." The days that followed were a mixture of training, learning, and discovery. Leora studied the history of the packs, the magic woven into their bloodlines, and the symbols Kieran had left behind. She learned to sense the energy in the forest, to move silently, and to recognize the signs of threats both human and supernatural. Thorin guided her with patience, his voice calm but firm, his presence always nearby. And with every lesson their bond deepened, not in words but in shared understanding and quiet moments of trust. But the past never stays buried. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the fortress shadows lengthened, a figure appeared at the edge of the forest. Cloaked in darkness and mystery, they moved with a grace that seemed unnatural, yet purposeful. Leora sensed it before she saw it, the stir of something powerful and urgent. Thorin noticed it at the same moment, his hand instinctively moving toward her as if to protect. "Do not approach," he commanded, his voice low and dangerous. But the figure continued, stepping closer, revealing a face that was familiar yet strange. It was an old friend of Kieran's, someone who had walked with him through battles and secrets alike. The stranger's eyes were full of knowledge and urgency. "I come with news," they said, voice steady. "The pup within her carries more than life. He carries a key, one that enemies will stop at nothing to seize, and Kieran's past is not as you believe." Leora felt a shiver run down her spine. What do you mean? What was Kieran hiding? The stranger looked at Thorin first, then at Leora. Kieran was bound to a prophecy, they said. A child from his line will either unite the territories or bring destruction. He fought not just for her life but for the hope of the pack and all who follow. The weight of those words pressed heavily on Leora. She pressed her hands to her belly, feeling the tiny life inside respond to the tension. Every kick seemed to echo the urgency of the stranger's warning. She realized that the danger was no longer distant. It was here, surrounding them, waiting to strike. Thorin's jaw tightened. "Then we prepare," he said simply. "We will defend her. We will defend the child. No one will take them from me." The following days were tense. Thorin's warriors moved with precision, fortifying the fortress and setting traps for the enemies they knew would come. Leora trained harder than ever, learning to move like the wolves, to strike when needed, and to sense danger before it arrived. She felt the stirrings of her own courage grow, but also a deep connection to Thorin, one that went beyond fear or gratitude. She realized she trusted him completely, though the depth of that trust frightened her. One night, as the moon rose blood-red in the sky, a howl echoed through the forest. Leora's heart raced. The rival pack had returned, stronger and more dangerous than before. Thorin's expression was unreadable, but his eyes held a storm of power and determination. "Stay close," he said. "This battle will not be ordinary." The attack began with silence, sudden and violent. Shadows moved between the trees, and Leora felt her body tense with instinctive fear. Thorin moved like a shadow himself, striking with precision, guiding his warriors and protecting Leora at every turn. She moved with him, weaving between enemies, protecting the child, and learning the rhythm of battle under his guidance. Then came the moment that changed everything. A figure from Kieran's past emerged from the chaos, one who had knowledge that could turn the tide. But with that knowledge came danger, as enemies recognized the power within the child and sought to claim it for themselves. Thorin was struck again, a sharp blow that sent him to the ground. Leora screamed, rushing to his side. The child inside her stirred violently, as if reacting to the danger. She realized with clarity she could not run. She had to face this for herself, for Thorin, and for the life that had begun because of Kieran. Summoning all the strength and courage Thorin had helped her build, she moved into the fray, using every skill she had learned. She struck with precision, protected Thorin, and guided the warriors around her. For the first time, she felt herself not just as a survivor, but as a protector, one whose strength came from love, grief, and the promise of life. When the rival pack finally retreated, the forest grew quiet again. Leora knelt beside Thorin, her body trembling with exhaustion, fear, and relief. Thorin looked at her, his gaze soft but intense. "You have grown strong," he said, voice steady. "Stronger than I expected." Leora pressed her hands to her belly, feeling the tiny life within. "We survived," she whispered. "But how long before they come again?" Thorin's hand rested lightly on hers. "As long as I live, they will not take her or the child. We will face whatever comes together." But even as the fortress settled into uneasy calm, both of them knew that the danger had not passed. The rival pack was only one threat among many, and the prophecy tied to Kieran's legacy loomed like a shadow over them. Leora realized that their journey was far from over. And as she looked at Thorin, she understood that their connection had grown into something neither of them could deny. A bond forged in grief, tested by danger, and strengthened by the life growing within her. A bond that would guide them through whatever trials the territories had yet to offer. The northern territories were quiet for only a moment. The shadow of danger that had been following Leora, Thorin, and the life growing inside her had not vanished. It had only shifted. The rival pack, strengthened by unseen allies, was moving again, their intent more dangerous and deliberate than ever. Every leaf that rustled in the wind, every echo of movement in the forest, reminded Leora that peace was fragile. Thorin stood at the top of the fortress walls, his gaze sweeping the forest below. His body had healed, but his mind remained sharp, alert to the slightest hint of threat. Beside him, Leora placed her hand lightly on her belly. She could feel the pup moving, a small heartbeat within her that filled her with courage. She had grown in these days, learning not just to survive but to fight, to protect, to believe in her own strength. The mysterious stranger from Kieran's past had returned the night before, bearing crucial knowledge. "The enemy comes with the dark magic of old," they said, their voice grave. "They seek to capture the child. If they succeed, the prophecy will unfold, and not in the way you hope." Thorin's expression hardened. "We will not allow that," he said. "Not while I breathe. Not while she lives, and not while this child grows within her." Leora looked at him, understanding the weight of his words. This was more than a fight for territory or power. This was a fight for the future, for life, for the legacy of Kieran, and for the bond that had quietly formed between her and Thorin. She nodded, determination filling her chest. "Then we fight," she said, her voice steady. "Together." The dawn of the next day brought a storm. The rival pack, led by the cunning warrior who had once cornered Leora, advanced under the cover of mist and shadow. Thorin's warriors were ready. The fortress was fortified, and every passage had been prepared for defense. Leora stood beside Thorin as they watched the enemy approach. She was no longer just an Omega. She was a guardian, her courage tested by every moment of fear and preparation. The battle began suddenly, with a roar that echoed through the trees and shook the ground. Thorin moved like a shadow, a force of power and precision, striking down enemies before they even knew he was near. Leora followed, using the skills he had taught her, moving swiftly and decisively to protect those who could not fight, and keeping her focus on the life within her. In the midst of chaos, the stranger from Kieran's past appeared again, guiding warriors and sharing knowledge of enemy movements. Leora realized that the allies they had gained, though few, were crucial. Together, they began to push back, slowly turning the tide of the battle. But the enemy had more than strength. They had dark power, magic rooted in old curses, the kind that had shaped the very forest around them. Shadows twisted unnaturally, striking at the defenders with force and precision. Leora felt her courage falter for the first time. The child inside her reacted violently, kicking and turning as if sensing the danger. Thorin noticed immediately. "Steady," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Focus. You are not alone." He moved to shield her, standing as a wall between danger and life. The presence of the Alpha King, fierce and commanding, filled Leora with a confidence she did not know she possessed. She drew strength from him, from the warriors beside her, and from the life she carried. The battle raged for hours, each moment heavy with risk. Leora learned to anticipate attacks, to move with the wolves that defended the fortress, and to sense the rhythm of combat. Every movement was calculated, yet instinctive. Every action carried the weight of survival, not just for herself, but for Thorin, the warriors, and the child who represented hope and the legacy of Kieran. At the heart of the chaos, Leora saw the enemy leader, one who carried the power to turn the tide. He moved with dark precision, wielding magic that twisted the forest and sought to strike fear into the hearts of the defenders. Thorin met him directly, their powers colliding in a storm of force and strategy. The ground shook, the trees bent, and the very air seemed charged with the battle of wills. Leora knew that this moment required more than courage, it required action. She moved closer, using the skills she had learned to protect Thorin, to block attacks, and to strike when the enemy exposed a weakness. With careful timing, she managed to disrupt the magic, giving Thorin the opening he needed. Together they fought with synchronicity that surprised even their allies. The enemy fell at last, the shadow lifting from the forest. Silence returned, though it was heavy with exhaustion and the awareness of what had been risked. Thorin, though battered and weary, remained standing, his gaze scanning for any lingering threat. Leora knelt beside him, relief and pride flooding her chest. We did it," she whispered, her hands pressed to her belly, feeling the tiny life that had endured through every danger. Thorin looked down at her, a rare softness in his eyes. "Yes," he said, his voice low but steady. "And we will continue to protect this child, no matter what comes next." He placed his hand over hers, a silent promise of guardianship and care. In the quiet that followed, Leora finally allowed herself to speak of Kieran. He gave everything for me," she said softly. "For us, for the child." Thorin's hand tightened gently over hers. "And his courage lives on," he replied. "In you, in the child, in the pack." The realization settled between them like a quiet warmth. Though the battle had been fierce and dangerous, they had survived, and in surviving they had grown stronger. Leora understood that Kieran's sacrifice had not been in vain. It had led her to this place, to Thorin, and to the life that carried the hope of the pack's future. Days passed in healing and preparation. Leora's strength continued to grow, as did the bond between her and Thorin. They shared quiet moments, walking through the forest, listening to the wind and speaking of dreams and hopes. Every touch, every glance was a reassurance of survival, of trust, and of love that had grown from shared grief and courage. The birth of the child came under a blood-red moon, a moment both terrifying and miraculous. Thorin stood beside Leora, holding her hand as the life of Kieran's legacy entered the world. The pup was healthy, small, yet filled with an energy that seemed ancient, as if carrying the strength and courage of those who had come before. Leora held the child, tears streaming down her face, feeling the full weight of survival, legacy, and love. Thorin watched, pride and emotion evident in his eyes. "He is strong," he said softly, "and he will grow to be worthy of the sacrifice that brought him here." Leora looked at Thorin then, really looked at him, and saw the man beneath the king, the one who had learned to love, to protect, and to honor both the fallen and the living. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Thorin's gaze softened. "No, thank you for trusting me. For surviving, for carrying the future with courage." The territories were quiet again, though both knew that danger would always exist. But for the first time, hope was stronger than fear. Leora had grown into her own strength. Thorin had allowed himself to feel and protect beyond duty, and the pup carried the promise of a future born from courage and sacrifice. As they stood together, watching the sun rise over the forest, Leora understood that life would continue to challenge them, but they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. Kieran's memory would never fade, honored daily by Thorin and lived through the life he had left behind. And though shadows would always linger in the territories, Leora, Thorin, and the child would face them together, bound by trust, courage, and the enduring power of love.